Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Future of High School Quiz Bowl Roundtable. I'm Eric Shu. I'm president of the UVA Academic Competition Club, and with me I have two guests. Jeff Hoppus, I think you're the vice president of communications at NAQT. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, and then David Reinstein, who is the president of the Partnership for Academic Competition Excellence, or PACE. Thank you both for being with me today.
Thanks for having us, Eric.
Absolutely. So before we begin, I'd just like the viewers and listeners out there to have an idea of why this project came to be, what my personal goals are for this project, and how I want the community to be involved. So for me personally, Quizbowl has always been a really big commitment for me in high school and in college continuing. And while thinking about Quizbowl as an activity, I came to the conclusion, although it was something that I loved a lot, it wasn't as cohesive and as coherent of an activity as a lot of the other clubs that I was involved in. So around the country, there's a lot of dispute into what kind of competition is considered Quiz Bowl. And when you try to introduce people to good Quiz Bowl of the kind that kind of like NAQT and PACE plays, it can be very difficult sometimes with the acronym salad that they're struck with when they get into the game to really know what good Quiz Bowl is, what 2020 Quiz Bowl is. And I feel like it deters a lot of students from getting involved with this game that we all know and love. So I really want to make this community more cohesive in that way by representing what good Quiz Bowl is in an easy way that makes it easy for new schools and new teams and new players to come in, have something that's accessible, something that's communicable. And I don't want something that's conglomerized, obviously. We won't want something that's excessively bureaucratized that would take away from this game that we love. But I do want something that's a little more coherent, just so that we have a better pitch as an activity. So to that end, I wanted to host this roundtable to kind of bring in a lot of the organizations that currently make up Good Quiz Bowl and have them talk about the roles within the community, where they see the community going, what kind of improvements they think that the community could make, in the hopes that it leads to some dialogue and some soul searching for Quiz Bowl so we can come out as a better organization at the end of it. So to start off with, I'll start with you, Jeff. My first question is, what do you think is your organization, NAQT's, biggest contribution to the high school Quiz Bowl community?
Oh, well, I would say first off, our number one core value is that we produce consistently high quality, professionally written and professionally edited questions. And so that's kind of the baseline of who we are as a company. Beyond that, I would say that what we are, in our acronym, for our acronym salad, I guess the first course in that menu is we are National Academic Quiz Tournaments. And not just do we produce Quiz Bowl, but we take the national in our title very seriously. That we have a standardized national set of rules, and we also run the country's largest and, in our opinion, most prestigious national championship tournaments. And that's one of the things we're most proud of, that we can go out there and run a 272-team high school national championship tournament that in a given year will bring in teams from 35 to 40 different states. And we think in terms of the nationwide profile of the activity and in terms of making the activity accessible to people all over the country and increasingly around the world, we think having a gigantic flagship national championship tournament that size is one of our real strengths as a company.
Excellent. Yeah, and I definitely, as a three-time participant in HSNCT, I will say that the tournament's always impeccably run, very well staffed. You guys have the logistics completely down. I don't think anybody would dispute that. And it's nice to see that auditorium full of faces at the beginning of HSNCT. It's a wonderful thing for Quiz Bowl, and I really appreciate that being there. So David, what do you think is your organization's biggest contribution to the high school Quiz Bowl community?
Well, our organization, our biggest contribution is the NSC. We bring teams together like the HSNCT does. It's about the same number of states, so it is smaller number of schools. And we really run the NSC. Not only do we want to give teams a great championship, a great opportunity to compete, but we also see it as a model that can be used for tournaments throughout the country. Just in terms of teams come from all over the place. Some of them come from places that have lots of good tournaments. Some of them come from places where that's rare. And we want them to see this is what a good tournament is and do that. In addition to the NSC, we have an outreach fund where if someone's doing something locally, they want to help out schools in their area. They want to help the circuit in their area. They can reach out to us and we'll help them. This year, we've actually started reaching out to those people in different areas and just to make sure they're aware of what we're doing. And that helps places. Last year we helped a tournament in New Mexico. Right now we're getting ready to help a tournament in Philadelphia. We're helping a organization in Iowa. So we want to, and this is becoming a big part of what we do. We also run a coaches conference to just get coaches talking more about Quizbowl and good coaching, good Quizbowl, what they can do in their regions. And we're also part of the Ben Cooper Awards. It just rewards people who are doing great things for Quizbowl and gives them more prominence and gives some of the top people something to shoot for in terms of just doing what they should do in terms of reaching out and extending Quizbowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the greatest strengths that I personally have seen in PACE's organization is the bevy of organizations that PACE has sponsored or otherwise involved with or affiliated with, or that have sprung from the minds of PACE members that are fundamental to the kind of Quizbowl infrastructure. So, for example, like the forums and the database, which I think everybody would agree has been really good for connecting Quizbowl on a national level since the forums have kind of been around. And we do have PACE to thank for that. They do have a big part in developing a lot of the Quizbowl infrastructure. And I also really appreciate that both of these companies, you all work together because you all have the same goal at heart, that this game is a national endeavor, that this is something that you don't want to be cannibalizing each other's fields. It's something we'll want to cooperate. I see PACE officers all the time at HSNCT. I see NAQT people at PACE tournaments. Make sure that the dates are separate and so on. It's a really great thing for the community. So kind of like building off of that, for you, David, first this time, what is one area you believe that your organization can improve in the most in the future?
Well, I think outreach is an area where we do need to improve. It's so uneven across the country, and I think a lot of times we're viewed as PACE is the NSC. And we can do more than the NSC. I mean, we're proud of the fact that we have the NSC, and we work very hard at getting that tournament to be as good as it can possibly be. But we also want to be more involved in outreach, and we want people to know that help is available no matter where they are, that we have members all over the country, and even if we don't have a member in your region, we're still willing to work with you and just try to find ways to get people in different states working together to build things up. And see how we can support people who are doing good things for Quizbowl.
Sure, yeah, and I think that as far as organizationally wise, your PACE is a good organization to start off that way because of the way you guys are structured as a nonprofit, the way you guys are structured with your like people who are working for PACE. A lot of it's volunteers who just have a lot kind of passion for Quizbowl. So on the outreach front, there's definitely a lot that's going on right now and that can be done in the future to increase PACE's footprint on the Quizbowl landscape. Jeff, how about you? What do you think is NAQT's biggest area of improvement in the future?
Yeah, I don't sound like I'm stealing David's answer because I'm not. We've prepared independently for this convocation. But I was going to use the word marketing rather than outreach, but I think we're very much talking about the same thing. That is getting more schools to play Quizbowl, getting new tournaments setting up in more places. Like we run a gigantic tournament with 272 teams. When I said that, okay, we're getting 35, 37, 39 kinds of states into our HSNCT. There's no reason that shouldn't be 50 states and then go international beyond that in the long term. So that's one of our long-term goals as a company. But in general, the biggest enemy that Quizbowl has today is inertia. It is that there are so many schools out there that don't play Quizbowl, where there's no coach, where there are students who would be interested if they knew what Quizbowl was, but have no idea whatsoever that it's even a thing that exists, that they can play, that has any national profile at all. And I think 15 years ago when the forums were founded, like there was a widespread sense that Parameter Quizbowl is just a little bitty startup. We're starting with, 25 team HSNCT with the 30 team NSCs in the early years. Like those were really small tournaments 15 years ago. And there was a general sense that these are small things that the early founders of PACE in 1998, the first HSNCT in 99, that those tournaments were fighting for market share against some of the legacy non-pyramidal or semi-pyramidal tournaments that were out there. And I think the early days of forum culture in the middle of the last decade were very much about how do we fight forward for this is what pyramidal Quizbowl is, this is what sets our brand of Quizbowl apart from other kinds of Quizbowl. And I think in general over the last 10 years, that fight is over, and we've won. It's time to declare victory. In general, like both PACE and NAQT are running operations of national scope and a national caliber that would have been inconceivable even in 2004, never mind in 1997 when neither of these organizations was running a national tournament. And I think what we need to do now for the next 10 years is we need to go out there and get schools that aren't playing at all, and schools that have no idea what Quizbowl is, or schools that like go to one tournament a year, play their local conference, win it, and then don't know that there's a next step that they can go outside their county and play. We're the best team in our county. We're 10-0 in our local league. Where do we go next? Hey guys, there's a 272 team national tournament out there waiting for you. And there are lots of people out there who should get that and don't get that. You look at somebody like Ryan Bilger at Gettysburg College, who was a fantastic high school player. And we think there are a lot more stars like that out there that are just in a kind of like elegy written in a country churchyard sense, never getting to the Quizbowl community the way they should be. And I think that's where we need to go as a community over the next 10 to 15 years of our growth.
Certainly, yeah. And I like the way that you guys both approached it kind of in your own respective ways with your organization. Like David, you were talking about the outreach area as a nonprofit, and then Jeff from a marketing perspective because of NAQT's kind of position as this longstanding company. And I do think that those goals are both admirable, and it obviously often goes hand in hand. Like many of the champions at HSNCT are people who go to PACE and vice versa. There's a lot of overlap between your two nationals, and I definitely believe that there's significant possibilities that kind of outreach and marketing can be directed kind of conjointly so that schools that come into the community can benefit from knowing both organizations and participating in both organizations. So kind of like building off your point there, Jeff, as far as like a long-term vision, what kind of long-term vision does NAQT have for the organization and for Quizbowl as a game as a whole? Like where do you see your organization being like physically in 10 years or so or 15 years?
All right. So this is where I will spit back one of our standard lines. That what are Robert Hensel's long-term vision as president of NAQT, what he wants this company to be as we go forward into the next decade and beyond that, is that what we want is not just a 50-state strategy for HSNCT. We want that. But we also want Quizbowl in every school in the country. We want it to just be generally accepted and understood. This is what a Quizbowl team is. Oh, everyone knows what Quizbowl is. Everyone knows that their local school plays, that there is media coverage, newspaper, TV, whatever internet streaming media that we can't conceive of 15 years from now, that kind of thing. And in general, we want every school in the country to play. We want every middle school, every high school, every college, every community college in the country to play and to have a team. No matter what your challenges are, no matter what your resources, no matter what constraints a given high school may be under, we know there are some high schools out there facing severe challenges. Every school in the country has 4 really sharp kids who should be playing Quizbowl, who should be representing their school in interscholastic academic competition. And right now, most of the high schools in America, never mind the middle schools and colleges where there's a lot more work to do, don't even play at all. And what we want to do going forward is get everyone in the country to play Quizbowl, to come out and play something that will qualify them for HSNCT. And
Absolutely.
Going forward in the future, we also think there's a lot of room for expansion beyond just the United States, to say we're running tournaments of international scope and significance, to say we should eventually get to a point where we can draw in English-speaking students from around the world. Think Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, India, and on beyond. National History Bowl has made great strides in this direction already, to say we should move forward to where in some number of years we are running an HSICT that's an international championship tournament and not just a tournament of national scope for teams within the United States.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's obviously a very expansive and far-reaching vision, but I think it's one that Quizbowl needs to have as an activity in order to thrive in this kind of like new age. We want to be able to say that like this is something akin to like basketball or football that is just
Absolutely.
Kind of unquestioned. Yeah, that a team exists at your school, that you know what it is. And an issue that I think is underexplored in Quizbowl is kind of struggling schools, like you said, like maybe schools who have low SES or kind of like majority minority schools in inner cities. Quizbowl currently Quizbowl teams tend to be relatively wealthy, relatively middle class, upper class, relatively white. That kind of diversity isn't currently present in Quizbowl, and I think that universalizing it would be a fantastic.
I'm interested in following up on that a bit, actually, because that's one of the things I think we really need to do a better job of as a community. In general, our core customers for Quizbowl are exactly what you said: wealthy, upper middle class to extremely wealthy suburban schools. And we need to do a much better job of reaching out to schools of all socioeconomic statuses. Of every school in the country has a team that plays. And there has been quite a bit of work done for schools that are in rural, isolated areas. Those schools will generally, if someone makes the effort to go out into a rural area and say, here's a statewide organization that says every school in the state of Alabama is going to play, or in Virginia, where there are 200 and some teams that play VHSL regionals, as you're familiar with, Eric. Those kinds of organizations have made very good progress in some parts of the country to say, yes, all of these Virginia high schools play VHSL. All of these schools play the IHSA State Series. Now, the question is, well, two big questions, really. One is, how do you generalize that to states that have no official organized government body? Like, obviously, there are some constraints involved when you have some kind of government organization administering its own Quizbowl, but also that kind of universal approach and universal baseline of it is expected that every school has a team is tremendously valuable. And in some ways, there are lots of things I wish I could replicate about that kind of VHSL model moving to the state of California, where we have been largely building up from scratch. To when I moved out here, there were 15 or so active teams in the Bay Area, and now we have many more than that. But they're also just entire counties, and not just like rural forested areas, but also like populous cities like Fresno and Bakersfield and Monterey that have just nothing in terms of actual Quizbowl. And the other thing is what you were saying about outreach to urban schools, which is something that Quizbowl has been absolutely terrible. Debate and Model UN are fantastic at that. Quizbowl has not had a good track record historically, and we need to figure out how to fix that. I know Chris Diego has been working on that both in San Diego Academic League and in the city of Philadelphia. I'd be fascinated to see how that outreach project works. So.
Absolutely, and I would definitely love to do a future one of these events involving kind of outreach specifically and bring in Chris and other people who are doing this effort and making sure that Quizbowl is truly a universalizable activity. And thank you for that. That's a very interesting point. David, with regards to kind of PACE and in marketing and like long-term future, where do you see PACE in 10, 15 years and Quizbowl as a whole in 15 years? And kind of like if you want to build off of some things that Jeff said about outreach, that would also be fantastic.
Sure. I mean, we agree. Jeff said a lot of great things, and you said a lot of great things in your response, and we want to be supportive. I mean, to a large extent, we see NAQT as kind of the national for-profit in Quizbowl, and we see PACE as the national nonprofit in Quizbowl. And I think the two organizations can both do great things at the same time, and kind of complement each other well. I mean, when you posted about this conference, one of the things you alluded to was Matt Jackson's statements a couple years ago, where he said he wanted every single state, there should be a great state championship that people who support good Quizbowl can be happy with. And we know there's going to be good questions there. We know it's going to be well run, and we want to support that. And in every state in the country, there should be good tournaments, well run,
right?
And it should be something students can work hard towards before they even get to nationals. And we want to support that any way we can. We're reaching out to people, and we want to be a part of that. We're hoping that's where this is headed in the next 10 years. I mean, when I started in Illinois, and I started in the 1990s, there were already 500 teams. This isn't something I had a part in playing. The IHSA sponsored a tournament, and the Masonics started sponsored a tournament, and now there's 500 teams. And you drive to small towns in Illinois, and they have Quizbowl teams. There's schools with 200 kids that are, in the farmland, and they got a Quizbowl team, and they play a couple tournaments a year. And We want to see how that can be done. Obviously, some of these organizations, there's been problems with quality and things like that, and so you have to work with people on the ground locally to see
Mm-hmm.
how can you get this official and do it well. And I mean, you would hope that 5 or 10 years from now, that's a problem that will have been solved, and that'll be the reality of it.
Sure, absolutely. I love what you said about kind of PACE and NAQT kind of both being able to work together in these different domains. And one is a for-profit company, the premier for-profit company, and one is the premier nonprofit that's involved in a lot of these auxiliary organizations. I think it's fantastic that we can do this kind of dual track way of promoting Quizbowl to schools. And I love what you said about engaging kind of the local tournaments and the scene that's already there and getting in contact with the local people. That's something I think VHSL has had a great amount of change over the years. From even when I started, my coach would tell me these horror stories of back when they used to have these awful questions, and then they switched over to HSAPQ, and suddenly the students were enjoying it a lot more. There wasn't a huge disruption to the current environment. They got used to it, and they thought it was a lot better, and a lot of those teams are now coming into playing pyramidal Quizbowl in the state of Virginia, run by college teams and high school teams. Those are some real concrete changes, like what you described with IHSA and Masonics. It's not be perfect. It's incremental, kind of this move towards better Quizbowl in a lot of states. And I think both of you touched on that very well as far as like nationalizing the whole idea of good Quizbowl. And so kind of like moving on from that a little more, or kind of moving backwards to the current state of high school Quizbowl. What do you think of the state of high school Quizbowl currently, David? And what do you think are some of the flaws and shortcomings that you see immediately concrete that we can kind of like address right now?
Well, I think a big problem now is just things are so uneven, and you go from state to state to state, and you see different things. Even a lot of the stronger states, a lot of it comes down to there's 2 or 3 people, and they run 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 good tournaments, and I mean that's giving an outlet to teams to play good tournaments, and sometimes that's you're seeing good teams coming from those areas. But we would like to see organization. We would like to see someone who can reach out to coaches and who can reach out to principals, get them to start teams, get the teams that are already started going to more tournaments, just kind of normalize that behavior where it's expected. Your school has a team and they play a bunch of tournaments, and that's just what's done. And so, organizationally, that isn't really happening right now. There's people on the ground, and it's great. There's someone in some state that's hosting 2 or 3 great tournaments, and maybe that's the best thing going on in that state. But there can be more. You just look around and you say, I wish there was something more there.
Sure.
So many should be doing more, and it's just not happening. And there's so many more tournaments that could happen, and just people are busy and they don't have time to organize them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think continuity is a big problem that we have currently. Your answer definitely addresses some of that. The fact that a lot of organizations and a lot of teams and a lot of states, they have these few people at the helm who are kind of pioneering their states entry into good Quizbowl. And then there's a lot of fanfare, the states being brought in, and then all of a sudden they graduate, or they move on to college, or they move on past college into the workforce, and then suddenly that support is gone. There's no longer that momentum, that driving force behind it. And I think that what you mentioned a little bit, and kind of what I would like to see building on, is kind of this more ex officio kind of role to Quizbowl, where people just say, okay, because I am this person in this community, there's an infrastructure, there's an institution that's going to support Quizbowl. It's going to have legacy. It's going to have people who are going to move on and supplant me in promoting Quizbowl, so we don't lose some of that dynamism, some of that build when somebody comes into a state for the first time and says, here we are, here's good Quizbowl, play it. Like Chris Chiego is, again, perfect example of this when he was working in San Diego, kind of being that driving force behind it. And just making sure that those initial impacts are followed up by something equally impactful, something that can continue to resonate within the community, I think is something that we should definitely work on more as a community. Jeff, also, like for you too, and NAQT, what do you guys think of the current state of high school Quizbowl, and what kind of flaws do you all want to address?
All right. Well, Eric, actually, you anticipated a fair amount of my answer to this question, your remarks just now. So I would say, first of all, our response to this kind of went in two different directions, actually. Our initial snap judgment was kind of to question the premise that your question, as it was originally asked, like foregrounded the flaws and how we can improve this going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Our initial snap judgment was to say, Quizbowl is pretty decentralized, and his judgment, one which I largely concur, is that decentralization largely works pretty well. We think it's good for the community that there are a number of different models out there. We think it's good for the spread of Quizbowl that there isn't any kind of like national oligarchy telling people what they have to do and what they should do. We think it's definitely good for Quizbowl that there is some variation for local conditions. That we wouldn't want a single unitary national organization saying powers or no powers, saying bounce backs or no bounce backs, saying this is how much classical music there should be in your distribution. We wouldn't actually want a centralized monopoly having, what Jerry Vinokurov refers to as the Quizbowl Pope in some of these discussions on the forums. Like, we don't actually think that's a good thing. We think it's good for the spread of the activity as a whole that there is some variation for local conditions, and we think that's a good thing, and we anticipate that it should continue going forward as the community expands. So So three of the things that struck us as what are some of the weaknesses of the Quizbowl community in terms of developing our operations on this kind of larger nationwide scale. We've touched on marketing and outreach already. I think both David and I have said our pieces on that, so we can move on beyond that. I will say, Eric, what you were just saying about retention is a key element of what we need to do here. In general, like, we do a great job of, this is a fantastic tournament experience for you, Eric, when you were an 11th grader in high school, for you, Matt Bollinger, when you were a senior in college. What we do not a very good job of, in my opinion, is two levels of retention. One of those is the necessary staff foundation of alumni who give back to the game. There are so many people who are fantastic players, who are potentially fantastic tournament directors and logisticians that we let go and we lose contact with. This doesn't have to be a lot. This doesn't have to be like there's the nationwide moderator draft and you're all conscripted. But even like, if we could get all of the alumni, and Perennial Quizbowl has been going for more than 2 decades now. There are a lot of alumni out there who have picked up the buzzer and played their toss-ups and bonuses who could reliably be called on to come in and help staff tournaments, right? If all of those alumni who are in their late 20s and 30s and 40s now would come back one day a year and say, hi, I'm going to go into my own college alma mater, I'm going to staff a high school tournament, that would be fantastic in terms of what it would allow us to do in terms of expanding tournament size, in terms of marketing to new schools. And in many cases, we're losing touch with those people when they graduate, when they go off into the workforce, that especially once you get a couple of generations back to people who are like, oh, this is somebody that my predecessor as club president knew when they were freshmen and the other person was a senior. Like, those kind of multi-generation linkages are largely being broken. There are so many of my contemporaries from the college quiz bowl of the late 90s and early 2000s. Like, tons of those people you see at HSNCT, but there are at least as many more who are entirely out of the quiz bowl community. And getting those people even to come back to one tournament a year, I think, would be fantastic in terms of what we can do going forward.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love what you said there. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah. So, in terms of like what we could do going forward, in terms of like better sharing of information, I think especially on terms of like between local hosts and the national organizations about who are your staff, where do they come from, what experience do they have. Every year when we have HSNCT invitations, we'll write to the president of some college club, somebody we know because they're putting up like 55 PPG at SCT, right? And we'll say, hey, Joe Smith, you're a senior, you're about to graduate, would you like to come staff HSNCT? And Joe will say, yes, that's great, I'd love to come moderate at HSNCT. And the thing is, every year we get referrals from somebody who's a college player and say, hey, these are my 3 teammates who may not be the all-star players on the team, but they're good moderators, they're interested in staffing tournaments. Can you also issue these people invitations to HSNCT? And We do, and they're great. We found fantastic people that wouldn't necessarily have been on our radar, nationally speaking, but are doing a fantastic job of like running the stats room at a local tournament for 24 teams. And getting those kinds of people involved in the game on a national scale of saying, hey, you did a fantastic job running that local 24-team tournament. Would you like to help run a control room at HSNCT? With that kind of input, I think would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and I liked a lot of what you said there. So, like, if you don't mind me kind of summarizing some of the points I felt were particularly illuminating in that analysis of it, I loved what you said about regional pluralism of Quizbowl, because it's very difficult sometimes, and I think the way Quizbowl used to go about it may have been a little heavy-handed to just say, we must do this kind of thing, this like this national conglomeration. You need to plug yourself into that and surrender to the board of Quizbowl, basically. That's definitely something that that Quizbowl as an organization has gotten better about, kind of steady change, noting the obvious kind of how much better this kind of Quizbowl is compared to the speed checks, the short questions that we used to have, but also accepting that there might be some regional quirks that might not be eliminatable, and that sometimes the quirks represent a good thing about Quizbowl and the decentralized aspect of it. And I love that. Alumni, I think, totally agree with you. Quizbowl has a shortage of alumni involvement in Quizbowl. Quizbowl should not be something you outgrow in this way. It should be something that you continue to give back to and continue to plug yourself into. And I know that, like, as far as like NAQT goes, you guys do have tremendous databases of kind of like players in high school who want to go to college, and maintaining more of these databases where there are people available who, you know, you could just use email to say, hey, like, this is a tournament that's going on, and we are the current members of so-and-so college's team. I remember when you played. That was fantastic. Please come back and help us staff. It's good for the game. That is vital to retention.
Yeah, and if I may break in for a second here.
Absolutely.
One of the things we see from the inside working for NAQT is that we realize we're running a 272-team tournament. We have gigantic moderator meeting at the beginning of HSNCT. So we know we have a good database. We're getting lots of alumni to come back and staff tournaments. We get lots of college players to come help staff our gigantic high school nationals, and that's fantastic. We could not do that without our moderators. But the thing is, looking at our databases from the inside, one of the things that has struck me in particular, but also talking to the rest of NAQT's members, especially to Joel Gluskin's Nathan Murphy, who are on point for recruiting moderators when we run a large national championship tournament. Like, we have an excellent database, but even our moderator database is shockingly incomplete in terms of good people for local events, or good people who were moderating 2 years ago and aren't moderating now that we're not taking up. So I think even for NAQT, there's a long way to go forward in terms of optimizing our staff, our retention, and our alumni.
Sure, absolutely. And I think for you, David, too, I'm sure you would agree on a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the resources that PACE provides and has kind of like an impact in like shaping the Quizbowl community. A lot of that stuff is also things that would help towards kind of creating this greater retention as a nonprofit, maybe volunteering through like PACE-sponsored tournaments. There could be definitely like avenues for exploring that, just making sure that the nationwide we have people giving back continuously to Quizbowl. And I definitely love to hear your thoughts on that, if we've had a future kind of like alumni retention sort of a thing, or anything like that.
To be honest with you, that is something we're actively looking at now, and we hope to have some results during this school year, as far as getting information on people who've played the NFC, even going back more than 10 years, getting in contact with them, making sure they're aware of what's going on around them, making sure they're aware that the NFC is going stronger than when they played it back in 98, 99, 2000. And so that's something we're actually, that's a near future project for us, something we've already started taking some steps towards, and we're hoping to see some results in the next couple of months.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely wonderful to hear. And it's really a great experience for me to be able to talk to you both as kind of representatives of these big nationals. And I know in some kind of different activities, there's a lot of inter-activity fighting and politics and drama. And I think for Quizbowl, what's so refreshing for me as a player is that although there were a lot of organizations, there was always this sense that they were all together as part of something greater, as part of this overarching mission to promote the spread of good Quizbowl, and that organizations were willing to look at their strong points, their weak points, to know how to shore each other up, how to provide the best possible product for the players. And it always comes back down to the players. And as a player myself, that was very valuable. I learned a lot from PACE, from the website, from the guides that kind of you all posted, and then from NAQT. I played my first kind of pyramidal tournament. I played a lot of my tournaments during my high school life. I loved HSNCT and the feel of it, and that both organizations were doing kind of separate but also like complementary roles to each other in the community. And I'm really glad that you all are speaking in this kind of like collaborative way, making sure that you guys are working together on this stuff.
Oh yeah, and we actively work together. A lot of PACE members do work for NAQT. I'm an NAQT writer. I help with the HSNCT and some of their other tournaments, and a lot of people who are members of PACE are actively editing and writing for NAQT. We think it's a great organization, and we're glad there's an overlap between them, and we're glad we can support them.
Sure. Yeah, and that's fantastic to hear. Jeff, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I wanted to second David's comments to say that we're very happy to work with the community. We could not run tournaments of the scale that we do without the fantastic support we get from the Quizbowl community as a whole. David in particular, as you probably know, not only David, thank you. As you know, there are a number of sets whose computational math simply would not have been finished without your contributions. And secondly, Eric, I don't know how much you know this, but David is one of the primary architects behind the HSNCT card system. So for those of you tournament observers out there who love how the HSNCT, sorts out its Saturday afternoon rounds to figure out who is going to be that 10-0 team at the end of the day, you have David to thank. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's great that there is that collaboration, and I thank you both for taking that time to speak with me about this. So I have one final question to you both before we kind of wrap this episode up. And it's kind of like basically what I've been hinting at the whole time, but the fact that High School Quiz Bowl, we don't want it to be some sort of massive conglomerate bureaucracy that's running everything, but we would like it to be more unified and to have a more unified presence when we're pitching Quiz Bowl to various teams and clubs and stuff. So what is the one specific way that your organization would like to contribute to kind of this unification of Quiz Bowl that you think your organization will be best equipped, without trotting on the toes of other organizations, to use your scale, to use your talents, your membership, to kind of work towards these common goals that we outlined? And Jeff, you can go first.
Well, let's see. I guess, I will start by hedging this. I'm not actually convinced as you are, I think, Eric, that the acronym salad or what have you is actually a problem in terms of pitching Quiz Bowl to new teams. In general, I think inertia is a far greater concern than the question of, oh, wait, there are multiple organizations that help administer this activity. So I think generally people who are aware of 0 Quiz Bowl nationals are the ones we want to target. I think there are very few people out there who are genuinely confused by seeing both HSNCT and NSC on the same schedule and think, which of these two do I go to? I'm paralyzed by indecision. I will attend 0. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of coaches explaining their reasons for going to which national tournaments they attend. By an enormous margin, the two biggest issues that we have in terms of why do teams reject invitations to come to HSNCT, you can probably guess these. They are, number one with a bullet, travel costs, which are a real burden on Quiz Bowl teams. The travel, airfare, and hotels to a single national tournament site overwhelms the cost of the registration fee. And secondly, by the other major factor in why teams turn down invitations to nationals is our graduation is that weekend, and our seniors can't play at HSNCT because they're graduating from high school Saturday, Memorial Day weekend. And so, not speaking for NAQT specifically, but just as a representative of the Quiz Bowl community, I think it's a very good thing that there are 2 major legitimate general audience national championship tournaments out there for teams to attend that find themselves in that situation. And so in terms of what we would like to do as NAQT on a national scale to bring Quiz Bowl forward into the future that it should be in 2026, one of the things we would like to do is use our known talents in logistics as a company. We know we put on a fantastic show at HSNCT. We know we have all this hard-won knowledge in terms of this is how you administer a tournament. These are the best practices for running an opening meeting, for running a tournament control room, for reporting stats to the tournament host. All of these things about the administration and logistics of Quizbowl that are just second nature to us within NAQT, I think in many cases are not being adequately conveyed or conveyed at all to future prospective local tournament hosts. That for a new host who's sitting down in a new state to say, I'm going to get 12 high schools together from my local region and run a 12-team tournament, I think Case has done some very good work in terms of the documents that are on their website, in terms of like White Winsolder stuff for Freelance Quizbowl University, for a lot of what Chris Diego has posted on the forums. There's some fantastic resources out there, but in terms of like getting those resources to the people who don't yet know that they need resources in terms of how you should host tournaments. This is how you should put together a tournament to go forward to be the best possible qualifier it can be to a national championship, and especially to convey a good impression of this is what Quizbowl is. This is a professional, well-organized, well-functioning activity. If you have a state, I'm not going to name specific names, but there are regions of the country where Quizbowl has backslid in recent years. In some cases, because of tournament organization that was somewhat suboptimal on the part of the local tournament host. Again, I'm not going to name specific names, but that's a concern of ours, and we want to make sure that we provide the best possible support to all of our local tournament hosts, where at some level, the core of NAQT's business model is that we sell our questions to hundreds, thousands of individual tournament hosts all around the country. And we couldn't survive as a company unless when we write, IS 160 that's shipping this week, we couldn't survive as a company unless we got 50 different hosts that are all going to use IS 160 at some point between 2 weeks from now in the middle of March. And one of the things I think we really need to do as a company and as a general Quizbowl community going forward is make sure that we can replicate the best logistical practices that we associate with a massive, prestigious flagship tournament like HSNCT, and make sure that all the best practices that we expect out of Joel Gluskin and Nathan Murphy at HSNCT are replicated and distributed and put out there to all of our hundreds of local qualifying tournaments. And at some level, that's going to be a lot of hard work because it involves extensive training of people who are already, at some level, volunteering vast amounts of their time and energy on behalf of this activity. So we think there's a lot of work there yet to be done. So I'll turn the floor over to David.
Yeah. David?
Yeah. I think what we can do is we can help with communication. If you look on the boards, they're a great place to talk. A lot of the people talking on the boards are about college age, and we'd like to reach out to people who are leaders in states and who are the top coaches and get them talking to each other, get them sharing ideas. We're already doing this with the coaches conference that Eric was a part of, but it was good to have people. I was there from Illinois, Eric's there from Virginia, we have DCC's there from Michigan, we have Julie Giddings there from Pennsylvania, and it's good to have people talking to each other, and that's something that needs to happen more of. It's already happening on the forums, but it's a certain group that's happening on the forums, and there's a lot of important people that aren't there. And so just how can we get more communications? If someone's doing a great thing in one state, how can they share that idea with someone else? Or if someone from another state is just getting started, where do they go? And so we feel like we can play a role in helping that occur.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And not to shoehorn both your organizations, but I think it's so great that you guys both identify that kind of strength with NAQT. Like, you guys are absolutely unparalleled as far as logistics go, and pace, flawless kind of communication skills, getting this kind of message of Good Quizbowl out there. And I love the fact that we have that collaboration, that we have this kind of vision for the future going forward, and that both your companies, both your organizations obviously seem very well equipped to kind of tackle this this brave new world of Good Quizbowl that we have ahead of us. And I'm personally very heartened and very excited about the future, having heard from you both. I know that your organizations do great things. And again, I want to thank you all both for coming here and, sharing your opinions with kind of like the public, and hopefully fostering some discourse about it. So yeah, thank you both tremendously.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot for doing this, Eric. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Very, very glad to be here. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah,
thanks.
certainly. So we, kind of for the listeners out there, we will be kind of following up on these conversations individually with NAQT and PACE, just to make sure that this productive things come out of it, that we can make the best out of what we have in the community and kind of build on that. For the next episode, I hope to bring in, as I said, Mike Chain, Rob Carson, and Eric Huff from various other organizations in Good Quizbowl to talk about kind of auxiliary organizations and the role that they can play within Good Quizbowl as a whole. Partially to support the two main organizations, but also kind of their own individual stories and their own individual contributions to the community. Until then, thank you all very much for listening. Thank you so much, Jeff and David, for being here with me today. It was a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad we could do it, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.